Torchlit ceremonies marked the end of training at Vung Tau camp. From here, the special teams went to operate in the countryside. Their war was heartless. Close-knit family structures and the Vietnamese tradition of retribution made murder, torture, and vendetta commonplace. Beating prisoners and brutal torture were an everyday feature of the war. The strength of family loyalties, the traditions of retribution, and the ruthlessness of the Vietnamese made this so. Gathering intelligence was often incidental. Brutality and assassination were time-honored ways of exacting revenge. It was part of Vietnam. It was part of Phoenix.
I'm an ex-c.i.a. colonel with blood up to my armpits. Not personally, I never killed myself, but I managed wars that killed a lot of people.
And this was one of them. For John Stockwell, as for many others, the system that generated torture was more powerful than any individual objections raised against it.
The c.i.a. was tolerant of torture in Vietnam. It also participated in it on occasion in some of the interrogation centers as a matter of policy. Of course, as a matter of policy, it had to deny it. In my own experience, and when I moved to Tay Ninh, I found the police chief there was using our safe house to carve up prisoners who didn't have family protection. I reported it in a discreet memo to Tom Polgar, the chief of station, and his response was to have me down for a cocktail party and quietly in the garden, a nice man, explained to me that he couldn't close the post down, it was too important. He couldn't get the man transferred because that would be interfering in Vietnamese affairs. So all he could think to do would be to transfer me, and he pointed out that that would seriously damage my career. So I went back to Tay Ninh and closed the safe house down, put out the word to my staff that I vigorously disapproved of torture, and so no one mentioned it to me again for my 2 years in the country. By suppressing it so that no one would talk to me about it, I could pretend I had stopped it or maybe curtailed it, and proceeded to work with this monster for the next 2 years on a very intimate basis.
44 provincial interrogation centers, known as PICs, were designed and built by the CIA.
Trước lúc tôi bị bắt thì tôi là ủy viên tiểu ban giáo dục của phân khu.
At the time of my arrest, I was a member of the Education Committee for the National Liberation Front in Long An. When they tortured me, the Americans stood on one side and talked to my torturers. They used electric shock. First they attached a peg to my ear, then my lower lip, then my tongue, then my nipples. They had a device like a telephone set which had a gauge on it with markings from 1 to 9. When they turned it from 1 to 8, we were still conscious but felt pain. When they used 9, we became unconscious. Then they hit my hands until they were all swollen like bananas. You couldn't close your fingers. Then they used a pair of pincers to pull my nails out and in, one nail at a time. I thought my fingers were going to drop off. When they pulled your nails, you felt a pain in your head. It was terrible. It took 10 years for my nails to grow back. Still, I told them nothing.
None of the PICs worked. We never got interrogation reports out of the PICs. Others said, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. They denied everything. In fact, I never found one who was ever identified as a Class A VC from a village. I never found one in any of the PICs. I went to all of the PICs, Military Region 3. Useless. Totally useless.
After my arrest, they put me in a helicopter and took me to the interrogation center. There were 2 Americans and 1 Vietnamese there. I was not a VC, I knew nothing. I was just a woman. They poured soapy water down my throat until I felt I was drowning. Then they poked me with a dagger, and they kicked me on both sides of the ribs. They beat me until I could have children no more. I hate the Americans. It's because of the Phoenix program that I have become an invalid. I hate them very much.
Torture as instrument of the Phoenix program, I'm sure it occurred, and I can tell you that the South Vietnamese were totally unforgiving of their adversaries, just as the communists were unforgiving of the South Vietnamese political operatives whom they captured. The agency knew about this, and the agency let the South Vietnamese government torture when it served a particular purpose. It's terrible to say, but there's no question that it happened. I saw the results of this policy of acquiescence.
CIA had never taught brutal interrogation because it's counterproductive. I learned that in World War II. When the Nazis applied that kind of technique, all they got was either what they wanted to hear or the person died resisting them. And you're not going to get accurate information that way. Interrogation is a very subtle art of bringing along the person until he begins to tell you more and more, and then confronting him with contradictions in what he told you, with what you know from another source. And then you gradually break him down and you learn what the real case is. But that is, beating on the soles of the feet or something doesn't help you at all in that process.
Con Son, Vietnam's Devil's Island. Built originally by the French and later enlarged with American help, this was Vietnam's most brutal and secure prison complex. It contained the notorious tiger cages. Cells measuring no more than 9 feet by 5 each held 3 prisoners in appalling conditions. Returning to the island for the first time since their captivity are 2 Vietnamese who were caught in the Phoenix program.
As I walk around this place today, I remember the cruelty and barbarity of the enemy. I still refuse to live under the same skies as them. By and large, we knew the Phoenix program was a dangerous one. They wanted to extract information from those arrested to hit back at the revolution. That was the intention of the Americans in order to win the war, to isolate the people from the Liberation Front, or more precisely, to isolate the people from the Communist Party. For the front was also the Communist Party.
I had done nothing wrong, so it was hard to imagine life could turn out to be like this. I could have accepted it if I were a Viet Cong cadre, but I was only an ordinary citizen, a truck driver. We often told each other that we had fallen into hell on earth. I can conclude that because of the Phoenix program, I, who had not been a Viet Cong cadre, turned into a man who actively participated in Viet Cong affairs.
The enormous volume of information collected by the CIA and other branches of intelligence created a dependence upon statistics. Increasingly, unrealistic quotas were set for numbers to be captured and killed.
The agency was lying in one case, and all these murders were going on in another case. And as my ideological house of cards was crumbling, Colby, as head of corps, came out to the province. And he sat there with his notebook saying, well, how many assassinations have we conducted? How many people have we arrested? How many firefights have we generated? How much this, that? And I looked at him and said, hey, you dumb, blind son of a bitch. Why don't you open your eyes and see? Do you believe all these statistics that you're reading? Do you believe all of these things that you're saying? How can you not comprehend reality?
Robert Comer was sent back to Vietnam by President Nixon to assess the Phoenix program.
What had gone wrong was the execution wasn't proving very effective. Picked up all the wrong people. But we found that most of the VCI that were being identified were villagers who were at best the lowest level of the Viet Cong infrastructure. We wanted to get Viet Cong province chiefs, Viet Cong tax collectors, Viet Cong district chiefs, or the commander of the local defense battalion. We wanted to get the officers, and then the men would all go home. And we targeted the program on that. So we got, on the average, a very low quality. We got all the privates, but missed all the captains and colonels.
This room, which is so barren now, was the CIA primary radio room. And a lot of CIA operatives carried little radios on their belt known as Diamond Net radios. That was sort of the code word for the system. And they left these radios strewn around Saigon, and Vietnamese who'd been left behind were grabbing up these radios and calling in. And I remember very vividly standing in this room with voices coming in over the radio circuits, Vietnamese calling for help, desperate for help. I'm Mr. Han, the translator. Come rescue me. I'm Miss Chi, your driver. Please don't forget me. I have my mother here. We'll be killed by the communists. In fact, it's a memory of the last day that has never left me. I have been plagued with nightmares. I call them sound mares, of Vietnamese screaming over this radio for help, and these walls literally seem to reverberate with their cries of panic. I saw it as the most heinous betrayal of our friends. The only thing you have to offer a source is loyalty and the assurance you will take care of them. And when you abandon a source, you'll never hire or recruit a new source. They'll never trust you. And so what we did in Vietnam those final days was to commit the one error that an intelligence officer must never make. We let people who work for us see that in a crunch, we wouldn't do anything to help them.